All right, hello and welcome to lesson 1 of Last Epoch University. This is a series of lessons in which we go through from the basics of Last Epoch to some of the more advanced stuff. I started this series 9 months ago. I did 11 lessons on it, and it was pretty well received. I did after I watched Zizaran do a similar series on PoE, and I really liked it. But unfortunately, those lessons are a little bit out of date now because there's been 3 patches, soon to be 3 patches. On Friday, we'll get 0.8.4, which I've added all that content into this. And so these need to be redone for newer players. So they're not going back and getting the old content, the old information that is oftentimes incorrect. So this first lesson is for people who are either looking to purchase the game or have very recently purchased it and are looking for some very basic info on, for example, what classes are like or what content there is to do that they can look forward to or work towards. So if you've been playing Ellie for a while, this is probably not the lesson for you. You can go ahead and skip ahead into some of the more advanced lessons. But if you are new, I think this is a good one to start with, and I'll try to make it pretty quick so that you can move on to the more advanced stuff if you're interested. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about myself, since if you're watching this, you probably don't know me. You probably haven't been watching streamers or content creators already. I am, of course, a Last Epoch streamer and content creator. This is what I do as my primary, really, profession. I've been doing it for over 2 years, about almost 2 years now, full time. I've played the game since late alpha, which is about 2.5 years ago. And I've logged over 3,000 hours of playtime into the game. I'm also what's called a community tester. It's a group of community members who get to play the builds a little bit earlier before they come out, so that we can make sure that everything is up to snuff. There's not major bugs, and that stuff's not, badly imbalanced, to give feedback to the developers. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about the game. What is Last Epoch? It is an isometric, quote, Diablo-like RPG. So if you're familiar with Diablo 2, Diablo 3, Path of Exile, the Torchlight series, Grim Dawn, any of those sorts of games, this is what it's like, and it should appeal to players on both like the Diablo 3 and PoE spectrum of ARPGs, as well as anyone who likes deep character building and or looting in their games. It is an early access game, so it's not finished. So bear that in mind if you decide to jump in now. But even at 1.0, it'll continue to receive constant updates. So it's never really a finished product, as these games tend to be. They're more of a games as a service. I do want to mention, though, that this game in particular, although not finished, has a great deal of content, enough to where if they had said it was 1.0 and didn't already promise a bunch of things, people would probably think it's a pretty decent 1.0 game, even a good 1.0 game. So don't necessarily let the fact that it's early access stop you from playing it. If you're just absolutely like, no, I don't play early access games, that's fine, I understand. But if you're willing to accept that there's more to come, but there's plenty now, I think you can get plenty of time in this game, as I've got myself thousands of hours into it. As far as single player, multiplayer goes, it is currently single player only, because multiplayer is not finished yet. It hasn't been fully developed. It is releasing sometime in the future. We'd expected it this year, but that didn't quite happen. Hopefully sometime next year, really hopefully in the first half, we'll be seeing it. And then by 1.0, we'll be getting our trading and our league/season, which will be called cycles in Last Epoch as well. So if you're familiar with seasons in Diablo 3, leagues in Path of Exile, we'll have a similar feature for Last Epoch. The current features in Ellie, there are quite a few of them already, even though it is still in development. It has 5 base classes with 12 mastery classes. So the masteries are connected to the base classes. You start with a base and then work into a mastery. So there's 12 total of mastery. A large portion of the campaign is complete. 3 endgame systems, which is a lot for a game that's not finished yet. A deep character building system with passive trees and a skill tree for every skill, which is probably my favorite part of the game. The part that got me into it is the skill tree for every skill is just really cool. Absolutely extensive itemization. It's getting even bigger here in 8.4, 0.8.4. Crafting system that's also getting an overhaul in 0.8.4 and getting even better. Multiple game modes like hardcore and solo self-found. Loot filter system that's fully customizable and way easier to use than Path of Exiles. Leaderboard system, in-game chat, and of course a lot more than that. Here are the planned features, because it is a game that's in early access, so there's still more to come. Multiplayer, of course, with trading, the cycles season/league system, 3 more mastery classes, additional endgame systems. I believe there's 2 that are officially called endgame systems that are not in the game yet. Chapters 10 plus of the campaign. We don't know exactly how many it'll be in by 1.0, but we expect there's probably going to be at least 1 more. More dungeons than the first one that's been added here for this 0.8.4 patch. A favor system that we know very little about, if anything. Lost memories, another system we know very little about, and even more than that. So there's lots of content still to come, even before the 1.0 launch. So how much does LE cost? It's actually a question that's good to hammer down. It's $35 as the box price quote, you know, the price you pay on Steam, or if you were to buy it directly from 11th Hour Games. And this price will not change at launch. There's been some controversy in the Discord, people thinking that they've been told for some reason it's going to be free to play at launch. That is 100% not true. It will not be free to play at launch. It will still be $35. So there is no reason to wait. Like if you're like, oh, I should wait for the free to play version and not spend $35, it's going to be free later. Don't do that, because it's not going to be the case. You'll just miss out on the ability to play it sooner. So if you want the game, $35 is going to be the price. You might find like a sale like 20% off at some point, but you're not going to get much less than that. No reason to wait for a free to play. It's not going to happen. There will be cosmetic MTXs added to the game later. They do not currently exist, but there is a whole system for it. And then, as we talked about, it's definitely going to be a thing that there's going to be. But there will be no pay to win. They've been very clear, and they've stuck very consistently to no pay to win, not even any convenience. So, like, you get stash tabs in PoE. You pay, microtransaction price for. That's not going to be in this game. They believe that $35 price tag means you should get everything in the game. You should get the convenience stuff, the stash tab stuff. You got buy that in the game. Any of them, any of the power should all be in the game. Only thing not in the game is some cosmetics. All right, so how is LE different from Diablo 3 and Path of Exile? If you come from either of those games, what will be different for you than what you're used to? So Diablo 3 is a relatively simple game as far as ARPGs go. It's not a simple game maybe compared to other genres, but this one usually has a lot of depth and complexity to it. This game is definitely deeper than Diablo 3, both in the content, the endgame system, as well as the itemization and the character building. They're all very, very much deeper than Diablo 3, but still less complicated than Path of Exile, which is, some people think, kind of a hot mess and just how complex it is. Some people love it, but it definitely makes it hard to get into that game. This game does not have that problem. It's relatively easy to get into Last Epoch. There's certainly a lot to learn, but there are very few potential roadblocks that'll just prevent you from progressing. They've done a really good job of making things deep without making them overly convoluted. So that will be something you'll definitely notice if you start playing. What game modes are in the game? We've talked about a little bit earlier on, like softcore and hardcore is definitely there. Hardcore means your character dies, you're done. Softcore, you can continue to go on. There's also standard and solo self-found. It's a little different than PoE's version, where solo self-found players just don't trade, but they can share a stash tab. Well, there's no trading yet in Last Epoch, so currently the system is standard shares stash tab. Solo self-found does not. So you start with nothing, no gold, no stash if you go solo self-found, but if you have standard characters, then you can share. The above modes can also be combined, so you can play solo self-found softcore or standard hardcore, whichever combination you prefer. There's also a masochist mode. In this mode, players take more damage and deal less damage. It's meant for an additional challenge for players who really, really want it, but it's not balanced. The game's not balanced around masochist. There's not even a leaderboard for it, and there's no plans to do so, either balance for it or have a leaderboard. It's not considered the main game. Most people just do not play this, but if you are looking for an additional challenge, it is there. And this can be combined with any of the other game modes. So you can have Maso, softcore, solo self-found, or Maso hardcore. You can do it whatever combination you like. All right, let's talk about classes. What options you have as far as making builds. This is going to be a very general overview of these classes. There's a lot of flexibility in the class system and in the skill system in LE. So there's a lot of like weird things you can do, like cool things. Like you can just, like, for example, there's a unique primalist item that allows pets to do necrotic damage. Like, pets that are normally nature based, but that's like a significant exception. So I'm just going to talk about the general stuff that these classes usually do or typically do. So to give you an idea, like if there's like a particular style that you want to go for, what class would naturally fit that role. So Acolyte has 2 masteries. It's got Lich and Necromancer. A Lich focuses on physical, neurologic, and poison damage, both spell and melee. And the Necro tends to focus more on minions. The Mage has 2 masteries, a Sorcerer and a Spellblade. They're both elemental damage focused, so you're talking fire, lightning, cold. And the Sorc tends to be more ranged, traditional spellcaster, where the Spellblade is a melee-focused, generally, class. The Primalist has 3 masteries currently, Beastmaster, Shaman, and Druid. The Beastmaster is focused on pets and melee. The Shaman is mostly on spells and totems. And the Druid on transformations. Druid, by the way, has gotten a complete rework for 0.8.4. That will feel very fresh if you want something that's new. And all masteries can use the same combination or use some combination of physical, elemental, and poison damage as their traditional damage types. There are 2 other base classes that are in the game. Rogue, which is the newest class that's been added. At this point, it's 3 or 4 patches old, but still the newest one. Has 2 masteries currently, Blade Dancer and Marksman. And both can use many damage types. Rogue has a lot of flexibility in damage types, so it's hard to like pin down what it does specifically, because it's just kind of, it can do fire, it can do cold, it can do poison, it can do fizz, it can do just about everything. Blade Dancer is more melee focused, and Marksman is more range focused. There's also throwing support in Rogue, so if you like throwing, you can do it in Rogue as well. The Marksman is the only class, by the way, that can use a bow, so if you're a bow player, you will want to go Rogue. Sentinel has 3 masteries, the Void Knight, the Forge Guard, and the Paladin. The Void Knight focuses on void and physical. The Forge Guard mostly on physical with some fire. Pally tends to be fire and physical, although it's added some lightning support recently. The best class with shields is Sentinel, and it's also got several throwing attack options like Rogue. Okay, let's move on to what the current content is in the game. So I mentioned there's more content in this game than you would typically expect from an early access game. Here's what it is. There's a campaign. It's currently 9 chapters long. This will take you a good number of hours as a new player, possibly even like 10 plus, just to do the campaign. As you get better, of course, you can go faster. But newer players will probably take about 8 to 10 hours, I'm going to guess. Then there's 3 endgame systems currently. The Arena, which is more or less a competitive mode where you fight waves of enemies and try to push as many waves as you can without dying. And there's a leaderboard connected to that. There is the new dungeon system that was just added, fresh. There's the first dungeon has been added. We'll go a bit more into that in another lesson, because there's quite a bit to it. Same with the Monolith of Fate, but the Monolith of Fate, I will say, is the primary endgame system and very well done with a lot of depth. Compares favorably to the mapping system in Path of Exile. It's the closest counterpart I can say, actually kind of like a mapping / delving. It's kind of a little bit of both, but with its own flair, with its own take on it, with its own activities to do. So lots of endgame currently and a lot more to come. There's also endless build making and theory crafting possibilities. Like, I seriously haven't come that close to doing all the builds in the game with my thousands of hours. Certainly not taking them seriously. So there's so much build making possibilities. If you're someone who likes to make new builds, likes to test new things out, just try new things, you'll have endless, and truly endless. I put endless on here and I mean it. Opportunities to do that. There's also a robust, recently reworked crafting system. The crafting system previously was good, but sometimes frustrating. The new one has a lot more flexibility in it. There's a lot more opportunities to do cool things with it. Super excited about the new crafting system. If you like crafting, this is a good opportunity to try it, and you can do it without like the serious complexity. Again, this is like one of those PoEs, lots of complexity with lots of depth. This has got a lot of depth without that kind of complexity. It's maybe not quite as deep as PoE system, but it's still got a lot of that, a lot of the depth, and you'll be able to understand it pretty easily. So definitely, if you're a crafter, you're gonna like it. Deep itemization also with lots of chase endgame items, and this just also increased. Like 0.8.4 just added a lot to the game. The legendary system was just added, which is another level of itemization on top, and the crafting system adds to itemization as well. The game already had a pretty deep itemization system to begin with. Now it's even deeper, and it's done so in a way that I don't think will overwhelm new players. I won't go into that now because this is just really get your bearings type thing. But later we'll talk about legendaries if you follow along the lessons, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Where it's a good sort of ease you into the deeper itemization, deeper endgame stuff. All right. So the last thing that we should tackle is, should I buy Last Epoch? And that, of course, depends on a few factors that we've covered here already. For example, how important is multiplayer to you? Do you really want to play with your friends and it's not worth playing the game if you don't play with your friends? If that's the case, then you should wait. Wait until multiplayer comes out, of course, and then you can pick it up. Hopefully you won't have to wait too much longer, but it's not there now, so definitely don't buy it unless you're good playing by yourself. Also, if an early access game scares you, and you're just really queasy about that, it's in early access, so that might be a reason for you not to purchase it yet. Another one that I think is worth mentioning is if you're a competitive player who really wants to push the leaderboards. In the single player environment, the leaderboards are not trustworthy. So that might be something you should wait for multiplayer until we have server authoritative gameplay. If none of those bother you and you love ARPGs and you like everything that you've heard and you want that, if the depth that you're hearing now is enough. Like I think for most ARPG players, if not just about everyone, there's enough depth here to keep you playing for a long time. So if those aren't big drawbacks to you, then you should probably take it seriously, the idea of buying Last Epoch. It's in a really good state right now, even though it's still in early access. So maybe it should be on your radar. Okay, that's everything here. I do stream this game 5 to 6 days a week usually, if I'm not playing some other game, and most of the time I am playing this game. If you want to stop in and see what the gameplay looks like, ask some questions, would love to have you. Also have a Discord where you can feel free to ask questions or just hang out with the rest of the community. Would love to have you there as well. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you again in Lesson 2. Have a great time in Last Epoch.